The distress signal came through on every emergency channel in the sector. It was desperate, broken, and filled with static that spoke of failing power systems and dying ships. The Velkari flotilla, once a proud merchant convoy of 17 vessels, now numbered only 4. They huddled together in the darkness of space, their shields flickering like candles in a storm. Captain Thala pressed her 6-fingered hands against the cold metal of her command chair. Her species had ruled the trade routes of this sector for 3 generations. The Velkari were known for their business sense, their fair dealings, and their complete inability to defend themselves against anyone who wanted to take what they had. They relied on hired protection, on treaties, on the goodness of others. Today, that goodness had run out. "Send the signal again," she whispered to her communications officer. "Someone has to hear us." The pirate fleet surrounding them numbered at least 30 ships. They were Kreth, a species that had turned raiding into an art form. Their vessels were covered in the stripped hulls of their victims, worn like trophies. They had already destroyed 13 of Thala's ships. They had taken their time with it, making each death slow and painful to watch. The Kreth enjoyed fear. They fed on it. "Captain, we're receiving a response," the communications officer said. His voice shook. "But it's not from any species I recognize." Thala felt a small spark of hope. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was strange. It was rough, almost harsh, but there was something controlled about it. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the UESS Valor. We received your distress call. What is your situation?" "We are under attack," Thala said quickly. 30 Kreth warships. They've already killed most of our convoy. We have maybe an hour before our shields fail completely. Please, if you can help, if you can call for reinforcements—" "Ma'am, we don't need reinforcements," the human voice interrupted. "We're 15 minutes out. Can you hold that long?" Thala looked at her tactical display. 1 ship. The response had come from 1 ship. She felt her hope die. "How many vessels are in your fleet?" There was a pause. "Ma'am, the Valor is alone, but that's going to be enough. Just hold on. We're coming in hot." The channel closed. Thala stared at the empty screen. 1 ship. 1 unknown species was sending 1 ship against 30 Kreth warships. It was suicide. It was madness. She had just sentenced these strangers to death alongside her own people. "Captain, the Kreth are hailing us," her officer said. Thala accepted the communication. The Kreth commander appeared on screen, his scales gleaming red in the low light of his bridge. His teeth were filed to points, a common practice among his kind. "Did you really call for help, little Velkari? How sweet. We'll wait for your rescuers to arrive. We'll let them watch as we crack open your ships and take everything you have. Then we'll do the same to them." The connection cut off. The Kreth ships repositioned themselves, forming a perimeter. They were excited now. More prey was coming. Thala closed her eyes. She had doomed the humans. Whoever they were, wherever they came from, she had brought them to their deaths. 14 minutes passed like hours. Every second felt like an eternity. Thala watched her shields drop percentage point by percentage point. Her crew worked in silence, knowing that nothing they did would matter. The Kreth were patient. They knew how this would end. "Contact," her sensor officer suddenly called out. 1 vessel dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. "On screen," Thala ordered. The ship that appeared made her breath catch. It was huge, easily twice the size of the largest Kreth warship. But that wasn't what made her stare. The vessel looked angry. There was no other word for it. It was painted in dark gray and black, covered in weapon ports and armor plating. It had none of the elegant curves of Velkari design or the brutal spikes of Kreth aesthetics. It looked like it had been built for one purpose only, to bring violence to anyone who stood against it. "The human ship is hailing the Kreth fleet," her communications officer said, putting it on general broadcast. "Kreth vessels. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth spaceship Valor. You are currently engaged in an act of piracy against Velkari civilians. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Thala heard laughter from the Kreth channels. The pirate commander responded, his voice dripping with amusement. "Little human, you come here with one ship and make demands? We are 30. We are Kreth. We are the nightmare that hunts the stars. Turn around and run while you still can, or stay and become part of our collection." The human captain's response was cold. "We tried. Remember that. You had a chance." What happened next would become legend across a dozen star systems. The Valor didn't maneuver like other ships. It didn't slowly adjust course or carefully position itself. It accelerated forward with impossible speed, straight toward the center of the Kreth formation. Point defense systems on the human ship came alive, creating a web of light that intercepted every missile and torpedo the pirates launched. The Kreth weapons simply ceased to exist before they could reach their target. Then the Valor opened fire. Thala had seen ship combat before. It was usually a careful dance of long-range weapons, shield management, and tactical positioning. This was something else entirely. The human ship carried weapons she didn't recognize. Streams of solid metal were thrown at incredible speeds, punching through Kreth shields like they weren't even there. Energy beams carved through armor plating. Missiles that moved faster than anything she had ever seen turned pirate vessels into expanding clouds of debris. In the first 10 seconds, 5 Kreth ships simply stopped existing. The pirate formation broke. They scattered, each captain suddenly realizing that they weren't the hunters anymore. The Valor pursued. It moved through space with a grace that belied its size, turning and burning with engines that glowed white-hot. Every turn brought more weapons to bear. Every shot found its target. "They're not missing," Thala's tactical officer whispered. "Not a single shot. How is that possible?" Another 3 Kreth ships exploded. The Valor flew through the debris field without slowing. More weapons fired. Thala watched as a pirate vessel tried to run, pushing its engines to maximum. The human ship launched something small and fast. It caught up to the fleeing Kreth in seconds and detonated. The pirate ship split in half. "Captain, the Kreth are trying to surrender," her communications officer said. "Multiple ships are broadcasting surrender codes." Thala waited for the Valor to cease fire. The human captain had given them a chance to surrender before. Surely she would accept now. Surely this would stop. The firing continued. A Kreth captain's voice came through on the open channel. "We surrender! We surrender! Please, stop firing!" The human captain's response was calm. "You had 30 seconds to surrender. That time has passed. You chose to continue your attack. Now you face the consequences." "But we're surrendering now. You have to accept surrender. It's the law of space." "Your victims weren't given that option," Captain Chen replied. "The Velkari you murdered didn't get to surrender. You made the rules of this engagement when you decided to prey on civilians. We're just following them." Thala felt something cold settle in her chest. The humans weren't here to rescue them. Not exactly. They were here to deliver justice. And justice, it seemed, had teeth. The Valor moved through the Kreth formation like death itself. Every pirate ship that tried to fight was destroyed in seconds. Every ship that tried to run was hunted down. The few that simply froze, hoping to be ignored, were given no mercy. The human vessel was methodical, efficient, and absolutely merciless. 15 minutes after arriving in the system, the Valor floated alone among the debris. 30 Kreth warships had become 30 expanding clouds of metal and frozen atmosphere. Not a single pirate had escaped. Not a single one had been allowed to surrender. "Velkari convoy, this is Captain Chen. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Do you require medical assistance or supplies?" Thala found her voice. "Captain Chen, Yes, we have wounded. But I need to ask. You destroyed them all. They tried to surrender. There was a long pause. When the human spoke again, her voice was gentle. Ma'am, you called for help. The distress signal we received showed us what they had already done to your people. We saw the wreckage. We detected the life signs that stopped transmitting. We knew what kind of enemy we were dealing with. But surrender is a courtesy extended to those who fight with honor, Captain Chen interrupted. Pirates who prey on civilian vessels, who murder crews and steal cargo, who treat sentient beings as objects to be used and discarded, they don't get that courtesy from us. Earth learned a long time ago that some things can't be negotiated with. Some threats have to be removed completely. Thala looked at her crew. They were staring at her, waiting for her response. She thought about the 13 ships that had been destroyed. She thought about the 347 Velkari who had died today, who had begged for mercy and received none from the Kreth. Thank you, Captain Chen, she said quietly. Please, send over your medical teams, and thank you for coming. We're transmitting docking procedures now. Our teams will be there in 20 minutes. And ma'am, you don't need to thank us. When we heard that distress call, there was never a question of whether we would come. There was only a question of how fast we could get here. The channel closed. Thala watched as smaller craft launched from the human vessel, heading toward her damaged ships. She looked at the debris field that had been 30 warships. The Kreth had controlled this sector through fear for decades. They had raided and murdered with impunity because no one could stop them. One human ship had ended that in 15 minutes. Captain, her tactical officer said softly, we need to report this to the Velkari Council. They need to know about these humans. About what they can do. Thala nodded slowly. Yes, but what do we tell them? How do we explain that we were saved by a species that fights like demons, but talks about it like it's just another day's work? We tell them the truth, another officer said. We tell them that we called for help, and the humans answered, and that mercy wasn't in their plans because they gave all their mercy to us instead. Thala looked back at the Valor. The massive ship hung in space, its weapons now silent, but no less threatening. She wondered what kind of world could produce beings like this. What kind of planet could breed a species that was capable of such precise, controlled violence? What kind of civilization could create warriors who would travel across the stars to save strangers and then casually eliminate an entire pirate fleet without hesitation? The first human shuttle docked with her ship. Thala went to meet them, unsure of what she would find. Would they be giants, monsters, beings of pure aggression? The airlock opened. A human stepped through, and Thala found herself staring at someone who barely came up to her shoulder. The human was small, slender, wearing a white uniform with medical insignia. Her face was soft, her eyes kind. She smiled. Hi there. I'm Dr. Emily Rodriguez. We're here to help with your wounded. Can you show me where they are? Thala stood frozen for a moment. This was one of them? One of the species that had just erased 30 warships from existence? She looked so gentle, so concerned, so completely different from what Thala had expected. Of course, Thala managed. This way, Doctor. As they walked through the corridors, Thala saw more humans moving through her ship. They were calm, professional, focused on helping her crew. They treated wounds, repaired systems, distributed supplies. They smiled and spoke gently to the frightened Velkari. These were the same beings who had just killed thousands of Kreth without hesitation, the same species that had ignored surrender and dealt out death with cold efficiency. They were killers and healers, warriors and rescuers, all contained in these small, soft-looking bodies. Thala realized something as she watched the humans work. The galaxy had been operating under certain assumptions for centuries. Strength meant size, power meant aggression. Violence meant chaos. The humans seemed to break all those rules. They were small but strong, gentle but deadly, and their violence was anything but chaotic. It was precise, controlled, and absolutely terrifying in its efficiency. Later, when the wounded had been stabilized and the immediate crisis had passed, Thala found herself in her ready room with Captain Chen. The human had come across in person, wanting to coordinate the next steps. She was tall for her species, but still shorter than Thala. Her face was weathered, her eyes sharp, but there was warmth there too. "Your people are safe now," Chen said. "We've dispatched a message to the nearest Velkari station. Help will arrive in about 6 hours. Until then, the Valor will remain here to ensure no other threats appear." "Captain Chen, I need to understand," Thala said. "Your species, what you did out there, is that normal for humans?" Chen leaned back in her chair. "You want to know if we're all like this? If we're all warriors?" "Yes." "The answer is complicated," Chen said. "Humans come from what most of the galaxy would call a death world. Our planet tried to kill us in 1,000 different ways. We evolved to survive in environments that would destroy most spacefaring species. We learned to fight because everything on our world fought to survive. But that doesn't explain the efficiency," Thala said carefully. "The cold way you eliminated those ships." Chen's face hardened. "No, that's something else. That's what happens when a species spends most of its history fighting itself. We had wars, Captain Thala, wars that killed millions, wars that nearly destroyed our entire civilization. We got very, very good at violence. Too good." "Then why do you seem so kind? Your medical team, they're gentle, caring." "Because we learned," Chen said softly. "We learned that being good at violence doesn't mean you should use it. We learned that strength without compassion is just brutality. We learned that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, not prey on them. The Kreth were weak compared to you," Thala pointed out, "but you showed them no mercy." "The Kreth made a choice," Chen replied. "They chose to be predators. They chose to murder civilians. They had power, and they used it to harm others. That's not weakness, Captain. That's evil. And evil doesn't deserve mercy. It deserves elimination." Thala absorbed this. "So when you received our distress call, we came as fast as we could," Chen finished. "Because that's what you do when someone needs help. You help them. And if that means removing a threat that has been terrorizing this sector for decades, then that's what we do. The Kreth won't hurt anyone else. Not ever again." "Your crew," Thala said, "they must be exhausted. That battle—" Chen smiled slightly. "That wasn't a battle, Captain. That was pest control. A battle implies the enemy had a chance. The Kreth never did. Our weapons are more advanced. Our tactics are better. Our crew has trained for scenarios exactly like this. We knew how it would end before we even dropped out of FTL." "Then why give them the warning? Why offer them a chance to surrender?" "Because we're not them," Chen said simply. "We give chances. We offer mercy. We try diplomacy first. But once that door closes, once someone makes it clear that they're going to continue hurting innocent people, then we do what needs to be done. Quickly, efficiently, and completely." Thala felt a shiver run down her spine. "The galaxy needs to know about your species, Captain, about what humans can do." "They will," Chen said. "Earth has been making contact with other civilizations for about 5 years now. We're still new to the galactic community, still learning the rules, the customs, the politics. But there's one thing we're making very clear from the start." "What's that?" "We protect. That's what humans do. We find people who need help, and we help them. We find bullies and tyrants and predators, and we stop them. It's not about conquest or power or building an empire. It's about making sure that when someone sends out a distress call, someone answers." "Someone comes. Someone cares." Thala found tears welling in her eyes. "The Velkari have sent distress calls before. No one ever came. Other species would express sympathy, but they said the Kreth were too dangerous, too well armed, too ruthless. They said it was safer to just avoid this sector." "Then they were cowards," Chen said bluntly. "The strong who refuse to protect the weak are worse than the predators themselves. At least the predators are honest about what they are." "You came alone," Thala whispered. "One ship. You didn't even hesitate." "We were the closest vessel," Chen explained. "There are 3 other human ships within a week's travel of this position. If we had needed backup, they would have come. But we didn't need backup. We had the valor, and the valor was enough." Thala looked at the human captain. She saw strength there, yes, but she also saw compassion. She saw someone who had come light years to save people she had never met, from a species she had probably never heard of before today. She saw someone who had dealt death to those who deserved it, and then immediately turned to healing those who needed it. "What do we do now?" Thala asked. "Now you rebuild," Chen said. "You go home to your families. You tell them what happened. You remember the people you lost. And you know that when you travel these routes again, the Kreth won't be waiting. This sector is clear. We made sure of that." "Will you stay? Will humans patrol here?" Chen shook her head. "We're not conquerors or occupiers. This is your space, Captain, your trade routes, your sector. We just removed a problem for you. What you do with that opportunity is up to you." "But what if someone else comes? What if another pirate fleet decides to fill the void?" Chen's smile was cold. "Then they'll learn the same lesson the Kreth learned today. The galaxy is changing, Captain Thala. There's a new rule now. Prey on the innocent and the humans will find you. And when we do, mercy won't be in our plans. Because we'll have already spent all our mercy on the people you hurt." She stood up. "We'll remain on station until your reinforcements arrive. After that, the Valor has other places to be, other distress calls to answer. But remember this, Earth might be far away, but we're listening. We're always listening. And when someone calls for help, we come." Chen left the ready room. Thala sat alone, trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of less than an hour, her world had changed completely. She had learned that there was a species out there that could and would help, that would cross the stars to save strangers, that would bring such overwhelming force against those who preyed on the weak that resistance was not just futile, but suicidal. She thought about the Kreth commander's last words, his pleas for mercy, his desperate attempts to surrender when he realized what he was facing. She felt no sympathy. The Kreth had killed her friends, her colleagues, her people. They had laughed while doing it. They had enjoyed it. The humans had ended them, quickly, efficiently, and without regret. And then those same humans had immediately shifted to saving lives, healing wounds, and offering comfort. Thala had called for help, not knowing if anyone would answer. The humans had answered, and they had brought something the galaxy hadn't seen in a long time. Justice backed by the power to enforce it, and mercy reserved only for those who deserved it. The galaxy was about to learn about Earth, about humanity, about what happened when Deathworlders decided to use their strength not to conquer, but to protect. Thala had a feeling that everything was about to change. The old rules, the old powers, the old assumptions about how things worked in the darkness between the stars, all of it would have to be reconsidered, because the humans had arrived, and they were nothing like what anyone expected. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every major civilization knew about what had happened in the Velkari sector. The story was told and retold, each version adding its own flavor of disbelief and awe. A single human vessel had destroyed an entire Kreth pirate fleet in 15 minutes. 30 warships gone, not defeated, not captured, eliminated. The Galactic Council called an emergency session, Representatives from 47 different species gathered in the massive assembly hall on the neutral world of Centris Prime. They had questions, many questions, and they wanted answers from the newest members of the galactic community. Ambassador David Park stood before the assembled representatives. He was human, middle-aged, with gray starting to show at his temples. He wore a simple dark suit that looked plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other delegates. He didn't look threatening. He didn't look like someone whose species had just demonstrated the ability to casually wipe out an entire fleet. That was the point. "Honored delegates," David began, his voice calm and measured. "I understand there are concerns about the incident in the Velkari sector. I'm here to address those concerns and to answer your questions honestly and completely." The Thexian delegate rose first. The Thexians were an old species, one of the founding members of the council. They were tall, crystalline beings who communicated through patterns of light that refracted through their bodies. A translator rendered their thoughts into words. "Ambassador Park, your species destroyed 30 vessels. You ignored accepted protocols of surrender. You executed what amounts to a war crime in civilized space. What justification can you possibly offer?" David nodded slowly. "Let me start with a question of my own, if I may. How long has the Kreth pirate fleet operated in that sector?" The Thexian flickered, their light patterns showing confusion. "That is irrelevant to—" 12 years, David interrupted. "The Kreth have been raiding that sector for 12 years. In that time, they've destroyed over 300 civilian vessels. They've killed an estimated 15,000 sentient beings. They've stolen cargo worth billions of credits. And in all that time, not one council species has intervened. Not one." "The Kreth were too dangerous," a Valorian delegate interjected. The Valorians were a warrior species, proud of their military tradition. Their fleet was too large, too well armed. An intervention would have cost thousands of lives. "And yet one human ship dealt with the problem in 15 minutes, David said softly. "Without taking a single casualty, without allowing a single pirate to escape. Tell me, delegate, if your species had that capability, wouldn't you have used it? Wouldn't you have stopped the Kreth years ago?" The Valorian's scales rippled with what the translator identified as embarrassment. "Perhaps, but we would have accepted surrender. We would have followed the protocols." "Protocols," David repeated. "Let me tell you about protocols. On Earth we have a saying, you can't negotiate with terrorists. The Kreth weren't soldiers. They weren't warriors fighting for a cause or defending their territory. They were murderers who preyed on civilians for profit. They laughed while they killed. They made their victims beg before they died. Captain Thala's distress call included sensor logs. We saw what they did. We saw how they did it. And we made a decision. The decision to commit genocide? The Thexian's light patterns were sharp, accusatory. "No," David said firmly. "The decision to eliminate a threat that had been allowed to exist for far too long. Every being on those 30 ships made a choice to be there. They chose to be pirates. They chose to murder civilians. They chose to ignore every law, every protocol, every basic standard of civilized behavior. And when Captain Chen gave them a chance to surrender before engaging, they chose to mock her and threaten her. They made their choices. They faced the consequences." A new voice entered the debate. Ambassador Kralis of the Danthor Collective stood. The Danthor were a peaceful species, dedicated to philosophy and art. "Ambassador Park, we understand your species comes from a difficult world. We understand that you evolved in harsh conditions, but surely you must see how your actions appear to us. You arrived with overwhelming force and used it without hesitation. You showed no mercy. You gave no quarter. This is not how civilized species behave." David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. "Ambassador Kralis, let me tell you about my world. You call it difficult. That's a kind way of putting it. Earth is a nightmare by your standards. We have weather that can kill in minutes. Animals that evolved purely to hunt and kill. Diseases that wipe out millions. Earthquakes, hurricanes, volcanoes, droughts, floods. Our planet has tried to kill us since the day we climbed down from the trees. He paused, looking around the chamber. But that's not what made us what we are. What made us was each other. Humans spent millennia fighting ourselves. We divided ourselves by color, by belief, by territory, by resources. We became very, very good at killing our own kind. We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities. We created tactics and strategies that maximized death and suffering. We fought wars that killed millions and left our world scarred. Then how are you any better than the Kreth? Kralis asked quietly. Because we learned, David said. We learned that being good at something doesn't mean you should do it. We learned that strength carries responsibility. We learned that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, not prey on them. We learned that violence should be the last resort, not the first. But we also learned that sometimes violence is necessary. Sometimes there are threats that can't be negotiated with. Sometimes the only way to protect the innocent is to eliminate those who would harm them. And you believe you have the right to make that decision? The Thexians' lights were sharp again. You, a species that has been in space for barely a decade, believe you can decide who lives and who dies. No, David said. We don't believe we have the right. We believe we have the responsibility. When we detected that distress call, we had a choice. We could have done what every other species in this chamber has done for 12 years. We could have expressed sympathy, offered thoughts and prayers, and done nothing. Or we could have helped. We chose to help. By killing, Kralis said. By saving, David corrected. 4 Velkari ships survived because we intervened. Hundreds of Velkari are alive because we stopped the Kreth. And how many others will live now? How many future victims were saved because that pirate fleet no longer exists? The Kreth won't raid again. They won't kill again. They won't make anyone else beg for mercy that never comes. A smaller delegate stood up. Ambassador Trill of the Nyx Confederation. The Nyx were tiny, barely 2 feet tall, with large eyes and delicate features. They were prey species on their homeworld, evolving intelligence specifically to avoid predators. Ambassador Park, I think I speak for many of us when I say this. We are afraid of you. Your species has demonstrated capabilities far beyond what we thought possible. You have weapons we can't match, ships we can't stop, and a willingness to use both without hesitation. How do we know you won't turn that power against us? David's expression softened. He knelt down so he was closer to eye level with Ambassador Trill. Because that's not who we are. We don't prey on the weak. We protect them. Do you know why Captain Chen was in that sector? The Valor wasn't on patrol. It wasn't looking for trouble. It was returning from a humanitarian mission. They had delivered medical supplies to a colony world suffering from a plague outbreak. They were exhausted, low on certain supplies, ready to go home. And then they heard the distress call. He stood back up, addressing the entire chamber. They didn't debate whether to respond. They didn't calculate the odds or worry about whether it was worth the risk. They just went, because that's what humans do. We hear someone calling for help and we answer, always, every time, without question. Pretty words, the Valorian delegate said. But words are easy. Actions reveal truth. Your actions revealed that humans are efficient killers. Yes, David agreed. We are. We're very good at it. We've had thousands of years of practice. But that's not all we are. Let me tell you what else Captain Chen did after the battle. She stayed on station for 6 hours until Velkari reinforcements arrived. Her medical teams treated wounded across all 4 surviving ships. Her engineers helped repair damaged systems. Her crew distributed supplies, shared food, and provided comfort to traumatized civilians. And when the reinforcements arrived and offered to pay for her assistance, do you know what she said? David pulled up a display showing the transcript. Captain Chen's words appeared in glowing text. "We didn't come here for payment. We came because you needed help. That's what neighbors do." "Neighbors," David repeated. "That's how we see the galaxy, not as resources to exploit or territory to conquer, as neighbors. And when your neighbor's house is on fire, you don't ask about payment. You grab a bucket and help put out the flames." Ambassador Trill spoke again, their voice small but clear. "The Knicks have been raided 14 times in the past decade. We called for help each time. No one came. Other species said it was too risky, too expensive, not their concern. Are you saying humans would have come?" "Yes," David said without hesitation. "If we had known, we would have come. If we had heard your distress call, we would have responded. That's a promise I'm making right now, on behalf of my species and my government. Any species here, any civilization in this chamber, if you're threatened, if you're attacked, if you need help, call us. We'll come. We'll always come." "Even if it costs you?" Kralis asked. "Even if your ships are damaged or your people are killed?" "Even then," David confirmed. "Because that's the price of being strong. You use your strength to protect others. You accept the risks that come with that. You stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, and you don't move. You don't negotiate. You don't compromise. You protect." The chamber was silent. 47 different species, representing dozens of different philosophies and cultures, all trying to process what they were hearing. This was unprecedented. No major species in galactic history had ever made such a commitment. The strong protected themselves. They built alliances for mutual benefit. They traded favors and calculated advantages. They didn't offer blank checks of protection to strangers. The Thexian delegates' lights pulsed slowly, thoughtfully. "Ambassador Park, what you're describing, it's noble, perhaps even admirable. But it's also unsustainable. You can't protect everyone. You can't be everywhere. And what happens when you fail? What happens when you can't save someone?" David's face became grave. "Then we mourn. We learn from our failures. We try harder next time, but we don't stop trying. That's not in our nature. Humans are stubborn that way. We see a problem and we can't let it go. We see suffering, and we have to try to stop it. Even if we fail, even if it costs us. Because the alternative is standing by and doing nothing, and we tried that once. We tried ignoring problems and hoping they'd go away. It almost destroyed us." "You speak of your species with such certainty," Kralis observed. "Are all humans like this? Or just your military?" "That's a fair question," David said. "And the answer is complicated. Humans are diverse. We have pacifists who would never raise a hand in violence. We have warriors who live for battle. We have everything in between. But there are certain values that most of us share. Protecting the innocent is one of them. Standing up to bullies is another. And the belief that with great power comes great responsibility. That's pretty universal among us." He gestured to the display behind him, where images of Earth appeared. Cities, forests, oceans, mountains. "This is our world. It's beautiful and terrible. It gave us life and tried to kill us at every turn. It taught us to be strong, to adapt, to overcome. But it also taught us compassion. Because in a world that harsh, you need your tribe. You need your community. You need people you can trust to have your back when everything goes wrong. And somewhere along the way, we decided that tribe didn't have to mean just humans. It could mean anyone who needed help. Anyone who was being threatened by something they couldn't fight alone." A new delegate stood. Ambassador Vrex of the Kalthari Empire. The Kalthari were a species that valued strength above all else. Their empire was built on military might and had subjugated several smaller species over the centuries. Vrex's voice was deep and challenging. Ambassador Park, you speak of protection and responsibility, but what you demonstrated was dominance. Pure, overwhelming dominance. The Kreth were not worthy opponents. They were insects crushed beneath your heel. Is this what we should expect from humanity? That you will judge who is worthy and who is not, and eliminate those you deem unworthy? David turned to face Vrex directly. Ambassador, let me be very clear about something. The Kreth weren't eliminated because they were weak. They were eliminated because they were predators who preyed on civilians. Strength or weakness had nothing to do with it. Their actions condemned them. If they had been twice as powerful, if they had been able to fight back, the outcome would have been the same. They would have been stopped. By any means necessary? Vrex pressed. By necessary means, David corrected. There's a difference. Humans don't use excessive force. We use sufficient force. In this case, sufficient force meant destroying the threat completely so it couldn't harm anyone else. If the Kreth had surrendered before the battle began, they would have been taken alive, tried for their crimes, and imprisoned. They chose not to surrender. They chose to fight. They chose to threaten Captain Chen and promise to kill everyone she was trying to save. They made their choice. And if someone makes a similar choice about you, Vrex asked. If another species decides that humans are too dangerous, too powerful, too willing to use force, if they decide you are the threat that must be eliminated? David smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Then they're welcome to try. But they should remember what happened to the Kreth. They should remember that one human ship defeated 30 warships in 15 minutes. They should consider what 100 human ships could do, or 1,000. And they should ask themselves if making an enemy of a species from a death world, a species that spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds, is really the smartest decision. Is that a threat? Vrex's voice was dangerous. No, David said flatly. It's a fact. Humans don't make threats. We make promises. We promise to help those who need it. We promise to protect those who can't protect themselves. And we promise that anyone who preys on the innocent will face consequences. Those aren't threats. Those are statements of intent. There's nothing to debate or negotiate. That's simply who we are and what we do. Ambassador Trill spoke up again, their small voice cutting through the tension. I believe you, Ambassador Park. I believe that humans mean well. But good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes. What happens when you make a mistake? What happens when you protect the wrong people or eliminate the wrong threat? What happens when your judgment is flawed? David knelt down again, meeting Trill's large eyes. Then we'll own it. We'll admit we were wrong. We'll make amends however we can. We'll learn from it, and we'll try to do better next time. We're not perfect, Ambassador Trill. We're not infallible. We're going to make mistakes, but we'd rather make mistakes trying to help than make mistakes by doing nothing. He stood and addressed the entire chamber once more. I know what you're all thinking. You're wondering if humans are conquerors, if we're going to use our power to build an empire, to subjugate other species, to dominate the galaxy. And I can't blame you for wondering that. Most species in your position would do exactly that. History shows it. The strong dominate the weak. That's been the rule for as long as civilizations have existed. But humans are different, Kralis said. It wasn't a question. We try to be, David replied. We've seen what happens when the strong dominate the weak. We've lived through it. We've been both the oppressors and the oppressed at various points in our history. And we decided we didn't want to be either anymore. We wanted to be something else, something better. Protectors, helpers, friends. Friends who carry very large guns, the Valorian noted. Yes, David agreed. Because sometimes friends need to be protected, and sometimes the only way to protect them is to be stronger than whatever threatens them. We don't apologize for being strong. We apologize for not being strong enough sooner, for not being in space decades ago, for not hearing the Velkari's distress calls before this one, for not stopping the Kreth years ago before they killed 15,000 people. He paused, letting his words sink in. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. And we're making a choice right here, right now. We choose to use our strength to protect. We choose to answer distress calls. We choose to stand against predators and tyrants and anyone else who preys on the weak. That's our promise to the galaxy. And what do you want in return? Vrex asked suspiciously. No species offers such things without expecting something back. Friendship, David said simply. Trade, cultural exchange, the chance to learn from you as you learn from us. We don't want tribute or territory or resources. We just want to be part of the galactic community. We want to share what we have and benefit from what you have. We want to explore the stars together, solve problems together, build a better future together. That's all. Vrex sounded skeptical. That's everything, David corrected. Humans are social creatures, Ambassador. We need connection. We need community. We need to feel like we're part of something larger than ourselves. For thousands of years, we were confined to one planet, divided into hundreds of nations and cultures, constantly fighting over scraps of land and resources. Now we're in space. Now we've met you and dozens of other species, and we've realized that we're not alone in the universe. That's not a small thing for us. That's everything. Ambassador Trill tilted their head. You're lonely. David blinked, surprised by the observation. Yes. In a way, I suppose we are. We spent so long thinking we might be alone in the universe. And now we know we're not. Now we know there are other species out there, other civilizations, other perspectives. And we don't want to conquer you or dominate you. We want to know you. We want to learn from you. We want to be your friends. Friends who destroyed 30 ships, Kralis reminded him gently. Friends who stopped 30 murderers, David replied. There's a difference. We will never apologize for protecting innocent lives. We will never regret stopping those who prey on civilians. But we will always try to find peaceful solutions first. We will always offer the choice to surrender. We will always try to avoid violence when possible. And when it's not possible, when we have to fight, we'll do it as quickly and efficiently as we can to minimize suffering for everyone involved. The Thexian's lights pulsed in a pattern the translator identified as thoughtful consideration. You present an interesting paradox, Ambassador Park. You are warriors who wish for peace, killers who value life, strength that serves rather than dominates. This is unusual. Welcome to humanity, David said with a slight smile. We're full of contradictions. We're capable of incredible kindness and terrible cruelty. We're brilliant and stupid, generous and selfish, brave and cowardly, often all at the same time. We're complicated. But at our core, most of us try to be good. Most of us try to help more than we hurt. Most of us try to leave the universe a little better than we found it. Even if it means violence, Vrex challenged. Sometimes, especially because of violence, David said seriously. Evil exists, Ambassador Vrex. Cruelty exists. There are beings in this universe who will hurt others for profit or pleasure or just because they can. And the only thing that stops them is someone willing to stand up and say, no more. Someone willing to put themselves between the predator and the prey. Someone willing to use force to protect those who can't protect themselves. That's what humans do. That's what we've always done. And that's what we'll keep doing, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others feel. The chamber fell silent again. David stood in the center, surrounded by representatives of species that had been in space for centuries or even millennia. Species that had established rules and protocols and carefully balanced power structures. And here he was, representing a species barely a decade old in galactic terms, telling them all that humans were going to do things differently. Finally, Ambassador Trill spoke. I would like humanity's help. The Nix Confederation has suffered greatly from raiders and pirates. We have no military to speak of. We have always relied on hiding, on being too insignificant to bother with. But we are still targeted. We are still hurt. If humans truly mean what they say, if you truly will help those who need it, then we need your help. David smiled, and this time it was genuine and warm. Ambassador Trill, you have it. Give my office the details of your situation and we'll coordinate a response. We'll help you establish defenses, train security forces, or simply patrol your space until the threats are dealt with. Whatever you need. Just like that? Trill's voice was filled with wonder. No negotiation? No demands? Just like that, David confirmed. That's the promise. That's who we are. You call, we come. Always. Other delegates began to murmur. Some sounded hopeful. Some sounded skeptical. Some sounded frightened. But all of them were thinking about what this meant. About how the galaxy would change with humanity in it. About whether this was the beginning of a new era or simply a new threat. David knew he hadn't convinced everyone. He knew some species would test humanity, would push boundaries, would try to find limits. That was fine. Humans had limits. But protecting the innocent wasn't one of them. That was a line that didn't move. That was a promise that wouldn't be broken. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant when Deathworlders decided to be heroes instead of conquerors. And David suspected that learning curve was going to be steep for everyone involved. 3 months passed after the Galactic Council meeting. In that time, the galaxy watched humanity with a mixture of hope, fear, and fascination. True to Ambassador Park's word, human ships began responding to distress calls across multiple sectors. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't demand territory. They simply helped and moved on. The Nix Confederation was the first to formally request human assistance. Within 2 weeks, a human diplomatic team arrived, followed by a small fleet of defense vessels. They didn't occupy Nix worlds. They didn't take control. Instead, they trained Nix security forces, installed defensive systems, and established patrol routes through Nix space. Pirates who had preyed on the tiny species for decades suddenly found themselves facing human warships. Most fled. A few fought. None survived the encounters. Word spread quickly. Other species began to take notice. The galaxy was changing. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Valor, watching the stars stream past as they traveled through faster-than-light space. Her crew had been busy since the Valkyrie incident. Too busy. They had responded to 7 distress calls in 3 months. They had stopped raids, rescued stranded ships, delivered medical supplies, and evacuated colonists from a dying world. The crew was exhausted, but none of them complained. This was what they had signed up for. This was why they were out here. Captain, we're receiving another distress signal, Lieutenant James Wilson said from the communications station. He was young, barely 25, but he had proven himself capable during every crisis they had faced. Let's hear it, Sarah said, already moving to her command chair. The message that came through was different from what they usually heard. It wasn't panicked. It wasn't desperate. It was cold, formal, and official. This is Ambassador Vrex of the Kalthari Empire, broadcasting on emergency channels. I am requesting immediate assistance from any human vessels in range. My ship has been attacked by unknown hostiles. My security forces have been overwhelmed. I am currently barricaded in my quarters with critical injuries. If there are any humans listening, I need your help. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Vrex, the Kalthari ambassador who had challenged David Park at the council meeting, the one who had questioned human intentions, who had suggested humanity might become a threat. And now he was calling for help from the very species he had doubted. Distance to his location? Sarah asked. 20 minutes at maximum burn, her navigator replied. But, Captain, this could be a trap. The Kalthari have been vocal about their distrust of humanity. This could be a test or an ambush. Sarah considered this for exactly 3 seconds. Plot a course. Maximum speed. Send a response that we're on our way. Captain, Wilson started. He called for help, Lieutenant, Sarah interrupted. That's all that matters. Whether he trusts us, whether he likes us, whether he's been saying terrible things about humanity for the past 3 months. None of that matters. Someone needs help. We answer. That's who we are. The crew moved into action. The Valor accelerated, pushing its engines to maximum capacity. Weapons systems powered up. Medical teams prepared for casualties. This was the routine they had practiced dozens of times. They were good at it now. 18 minutes later, they dropped out of FTL near Vrex's vessel. What they found made Sarah's jaw clench. The Kalthari diplomatic ship was surrounded by 8 warships bearing the markings of the Dravok Syndicate. The Dravok were slavers, notorious for capturing high-value targets and holding them for ransom. Vrex's ship was heavily damaged, its shields flickering, its engines offline. "Open a channel to the Dravok vessels," Sarah ordered. "Channel open, Captain." Sarah kept her voice steady and professional. "Dravok ships, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the UESS Valor. You are engaged in an illegal act of piracy and kidnapping. Power down your weapons immediately and prepare to release Ambassador Vrex. This is your only warning." The response came quickly. A Dravok commander appeared on screen, his face covered in ritual scars that marked him as a high-ranking slaver. He smiled, showing filed teeth. "Little human, you should learn to mind your own business. The Kalthari have made many enemies. The ambassador's ransom will be quite profitable. Leave now, or we'll add a human ship to our collection." "I gave you a warning," Sarah said quietly. "You chose to ignore it. Remember that." The channel closed. Sarah looked at her tactical officer. "Status on the Dravok fleet?" 8 warships, heavy cruiser class. They're positioning to engage us. Weapons are powering up. They're not running, Captain." "Good," Sarah said and meant it. "I'm tired of chasing people. Bring us about. Target their weapons systems first. I want them disabled, not destroyed. These are slavers, which means they likely have captives aboard. We need to be precise." The Valor moved forward, accelerating toward the Dravok formation. The enemy ships opened fire, launching missiles and energy weapons at the human vessel. Point defense systems came alive, intercepting every projectile before it could reach the hull. The Valor's shields flared as energy beams struck them, but held firm. Then the Valor fired back. Sarah had learned a lot since the Velkari incident. She had learned to calibrate weapons for specific effects. The Valor's railguns targeted engine sections, crippling 2 Dravok ships in the first salvo. Precision lasers carved through weapon mounts, disabling offensive systems without breaching hulls. Missiles with shaped charges punched through shields and armor to destroy specific systems while leaving life support intact. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it was over, all 8 Dravok ships were floating dead in space, their weapons offline. Their engines disabled, but their crews alive. The Valor hadn't destroyed a single vessel. It had simply made them irrelevant. "Send boarding teams to secure the Dravok ships," Sarah ordered. "Marines are authorized to use necessary force, but I want prisoners, not bodies. Find any captives they're holding and prepare them for medical treatment. And get a team to Ambassador Vrex's ship immediately. He said he was injured." 20 minutes later, Sarah was in the Valor's medical bay, watching as her chief medical officer worked on Ambassador Vrex. The Kalthari was large, nearly 8 feet tall even lying down, with thick scales and powerful muscles. But he looked vulnerable now, with multiple injuries and burns covering his body. "He'll live," Dr. Rodriguez said. "The injuries look worse than they are. He defended his quarters well. Took out 3 Dravok slavers before they gave up trying to breach his door." Vrex's eyes opened. They were yellow and slitted like a reptile's. They focused on Sarah. "You came. You called," Sarah replied simply. "That's all that matters." "I questioned your species at the council," Vrex said, his voice rough with pain. I suggested you might be a threat. I challenged your ambassador. I made it clear I didn't trust humans. I know, Sarah said. I watched the recording. And yet you came anyway. Ambassador, I'm going to let you in on a secret about humans, Sarah said, pulling up a chair to sit beside his bed. We don't hold grudges when lives are at stake. You can insult us, challenge us, question our motives, call us names, whatever you want. But the moment you need help, the moment you're in danger, all of that disappears. We help. That's not conditional. That's not dependent on whether you like us or trust us. It's just what we do. Vrex was quiet for a long moment. The Dravok, they were specifically targeting me. They wanted to make an example, to show that even high-ranking Kalthari officials aren't safe. My own military forces couldn't respond in time. I had no one else to call. You had us, Sarah said. You've always had us. From the moment humanity entered the galactic community, you had us, whether you wanted us or not. I was wrong about your species, Vrex said quietly. At the council, I suggested you were seeking dominance, that you would judge others and destroy those you deemed unworthy. I see now that I projected my own species' values onto yours. Sarah tilted her head. What do you mean? The Kalthari Empire was built on strength, Vrex explained. We conquered weaker species. We subjugated them. We ruled through force. When I saw what you did to the Kreth, I assumed you would follow the same path. I assumed that such power would inevitably be used for domination. That's what power has always meant in my experience. But we're not you, Sarah said gently. Different species, different history, different values. Humans learned the hard way that domination doesn't work in the long run. It breeds resentment, rebellion, and conflict. We tried it, we failed at it, we hurt ourselves and others in the process, so we chose a different path. The path of protection, Vrex said. Your ambassador spoke of this. I didn't believe him. I thought it was propaganda, political maneuvering. No species offers such things without expecting something in return. We expect friendship, Sarah said. That's not nothing. We expect that if we help you, you'll remember it. Maybe you'll help us someday. Maybe you'll help someone else who needs it. Maybe you'll just tell others that humans can be trusted. That's enough for us. Dr. Rodriguez came back over. Ambassador, I need to finish your treatment. You should rest. Vrex nodded but kept his eyes on Sarah. Captain Chen, when your people make promises, you keep them. I understand that now. I will speak to my government. The Kalthari Empire has been hesitant about humanity. We saw you as potential rivals or threats. But perhaps we should see you as potential allies instead. We'd like that, Sarah said sincerely. But there's no pressure. Take your time. Decide what's right for your people. Just know that whether we're allies or not, if you call for help again, we'll come. That doesn't change. She stood to leave, but Vrex's voice stopped her. The Dravok you captured. What will you do with them? We'll turn them over to the Galactic Security Force, Sarah said. They're slavers. They'll face justice for their crimes. We found 16 captives on their ships. Different species, different stories, but all of them taken against their will. They'll be returned to their homes or given sanctuary if they prefer. The Dravok will spend a long time in prison. You didn't kill them, Vrex observed. The Kreth pirates, you eliminated. But the Dravok, you captured. Different situations, Sarah explained. The Kreth were actively murdering civilians when we arrived. They refused to surrender before the battle began. They made their intentions clear. The Dravok were slavers, which is terrible, but they weren't in the process of killing anyone when we arrived. We disabled their ships, secured their captives, and ended the threat. They can face justice through proper channels. Sometimes that's possible. Sometimes it's not. We make the call based on the situation. And who decides? Vrex asked. Who determines when to show mercy and when to eliminate threats? We do, Sarah said honestly. Every captain makes that decision in the moment, based on the circumstances and their best judgment. It's not perfect. We'll probably make mistakes. But we try to err on the side of preserving life when possible. The Kreth didn't give us that option. The Dravok did. That made all the difference. She left the medical bay and returned to the bridge. Her crew was coordinating with the Galactic Security Force, transferring prisoners and evidence. The rescued captives were being treated, given food and clothes, and prepared for transport home. It was messy, complicated work. But it was good work. "Captain, we're receiving multiple communications," Lieutenant Wilson said. "News services want interviews. Other species are asking for details, and we have 17 new distress calls from various locations across the sector. Everyone heard that we were here. They're asking for help." Sarah closed her eyes briefly. 17 distress calls. The Valor was one ship. They couldn't respond to all of them. They couldn't be everywhere at once. This was the problem Ambassador Park had warned about. The galaxy was big. Human resources were limited. They could help, but they couldn't help everyone. "Contact Earth Fleet Command," Sarah ordered. "We need more ships out here. Forward them all 17 distress calls with our assessment of priority. We'll respond to the most urgent while waiting for backup." "Captain, some of these calls might be false," Wilson warned. "Word is spreading that humans respond to distress signals. Some groups might try to exploit that." "Then we'll figure it out when we get there," Sarah said. "We investigate, we assess, we help if help is needed. If someone is lying or trying to manipulate us, we'll deal with that too. But we can't let the possibility of deception stop us from helping people who genuinely need it." Over the next few weeks, more human ships arrived in the sector. Not just military vessels like the Valor, but also civilian ships crewed by volunteers. Merchants who diverted their routes to respond to distress calls, scientists who offered their expertise to struggling colonies, teachers who helped establish schools on frontier worlds. Humanity was answering the call in every way possible. The galaxy watched and began to understand. Humans weren't conquerors. They weren't going to build an empire or subjugate other species. They were going to be exactly what Ambassador Park had promised: neighbors, protectors, friends. And sometimes, when necessary, they would be warriors who brought swift and terrible justice to those who preyed on the innocent. The Kalthari Empire was the first major power to formally ally with humanity. Ambassador Vrex returned to his government and spoke about what he had experienced. He told them about the humans who had saved him despite his public distrust of their species. He told them about Captain Chen's words, about the human philosophy of protection and responsibility. And he told them that the galaxy was changing, and the Kalthari could either change with it or be left behind. Other species followed. The Valorians, who had once questioned human methods, began joint training exercises with human military forces. They learned human tactics, human strategies, and human values. They learned that strength without compassion was just brutality, but compassion without strength was useless. You needed both. The Nix Confederation flourished under human protection. Trade routes that had been too dangerous for decades became safe. Colonies that had lived in fear began to thrive, and the Nix people, who had been prey for so long, began to learn that the galaxy could be kind when someone was willing to make it so. Even the Thexians, the crystalline beings who had been so critical at the council meeting, eventually came around. They had watched humanity for months, analyzing every action, every decision, every outcome, and they reached a conclusion. Humans were sincere, flawed, certainly, capable of violence, absolutely, but sincere in their desire to help. And in a galaxy where most species looked out only for themselves, sincerity was valuable. 6 months after the Velkari incident, the Galactic Council held another session. This time, the atmosphere was different, less suspicious, more hopeful. The Council was discussing the formation of a new organization, the Galactic Protection Initiative. Its purpose was simple: respond to threats against civilian populations, coordinate rescue operations, and ensure that distress calls were answered promptly. Humanity would lead the initiative, but other species would contribute ships, resources, and personnel. The strong would protect the weak, the capable would help the vulnerable, and pirates, slavers, and other predators would learn that the galaxy had changed, that their victims had protectors now. And those protectors didn't negotiate, didn't compromise, and didn't show mercy to those who showed none to others. Ambassador David Park stood before the Council once more. This initiative represents a new era for the galactic community, an era where we look out for each other, where we recognize that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak, where we understand that evil exists, but it doesn't have to win, not when we stand together. Ambassador Trill, whose voice had once been small and frightened, now spoke with confidence. The Nix Confederation pledges its full support to this initiative. We have seen what humans can do. We have experienced their protection, and we want to ensure that others can experience it too. No one should have to live in fear, as we once did. Ambassador Vrex stood next, his massive form imposing, even in the peaceful setting of the council chamber. The Kalthari Empire also pledges its support. We were wrong about humanity. We projected our own history onto them and assumed they would follow our path. But humans have shown us a different way, a better way. And the Kalthari will learn from this. We will be better allies, better neighbors, and better protectors to those who need protection. One by one, species after species stood and pledged their support. Not all of them. There were still skeptics, still those who feared human power or resented human influence. But the majority had seen enough. They had watched humans respond to distress calls without asking for payment. They had seen human ships risk themselves to save strangers. They had witnessed human compassion and human fury, often in the same breath. The vote passed with overwhelming support. The Galactic Protection Initiative was born. Ships began organizing into rapid response fleets. Communication networks were upgraded to ensure distress calls could be received across vast distances. Training programs were established to teach other species human tactics and strategies. The galaxy was learning to protect itself, guided by the species from the Death World who had decided that their strength would be used for good. Captain Sarah Chen received new orders a month later. The Valor would remain on active patrol, but she was also being assigned to train other species' crews, to teach them what she had learned, what humanity had learned through centuries of conflict and cooperation. It was humbling in a way. She was just one person, one captain of one ship. But she represented something larger. She represented humanity's promise to the galaxy. On her first day as an instructor, she stood before a classroom filled with representatives from a dozen different species. They looked at her with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and uncertainty. She was human. She was from a death world. She had destroyed entire fleets in minutes. What could she possibly teach them? "Good morning," Sarah said, keeping her voice friendly and open. "I'm Captain Chen. Before we begin your tactical training, I want to make something clear. The goal here isn't to turn you into humans. It's not to make you think like us or act like us. Every species here has its own strengths, its own culture, its own values. And that's good. That's valuable. We need diversity in the galaxy." She paused, looking at each face in turn. "What I'm here to teach you isn't just tactics or weapons or how to win battles. I'm here to teach you why we fight. Because that's the most important thing. It's not enough to be strong. You have to know what you're fighting for. You have to know who you're protecting. You have to understand that every battle has consequences, and those consequences matter." A young Valorian officer raised a hand. "Captain Chen, at the Velkari incident, you destroyed 30 ships without accepting surrender. Was that the right decision?" Sarah appreciated the directness of the question. That's a complicated question. In the moment, with the information I had, I believed it was the right decision. The Kreth had already murdered hundreds of people. They had made it clear they would continue murdering people. They had threatened me and my ship. They had chosen violence over every other option. So yes, I eliminated them. She took a breath. But here's what you need to understand. That decision weighs on me. Every day. Those were living beings. They made terrible choices. They did terrible things, but they were still sentient creatures whose lives ended because of my orders. I don't celebrate that. I don't take pride in it. I accept it as a necessary outcome of a terrible situation. And I carry the weight of it. So you have regrets? Another student asked. I have responsibilities, Sarah corrected. I'm responsible for my crew's safety. I'm responsible for the civilians I'm trying to protect. I'm responsible for making sure that when I use force, it's proportional and necessary. And yes, I'm responsible for the lives I take, even when they belong to people who were actively trying to harm others. That's the burden of command. That's the burden of being strong. You don't get to use your strength without accepting responsibility for how you use it. The class was silent, absorbing this. Sarah continued. Some of you come from species that value honor in combat. Some of you come from peaceful cultures that avoid conflict. Some of you come from backgrounds where strength equals dominance. You're all going to approach this training differently, and that's fine. But there's one thing I need you all to understand before we go any further. She pulled up a display showing the Galactic Protection Initiative's mission statement. This isn't about winning. This isn't about dominating enemies or proving how strong we are. This is about protection. Every time you respond to a distress call, every time you engage a hostile force, every time you make a decision about using force, you need to ask yourself, who am I protecting? Who needs my help? And am I using the minimum amount of force necessary to keep them safe? But what about enemies who won't surrender? The Valorian asked. What about threats that can only be stopped with overwhelming force? Then you use overwhelming force, Sarah said simply. But you do it quickly, cleanly, and with the understanding that it was necessary. You don't enjoy it. You don't drag it out. You don't make it worse than it has to be. You do what must be done. And then you immediately shift to helping whoever needs help. That's the balance. That's what humans learned and what we're trying to teach. Over the following months, the Galactic Protection Initiative grew in size and capability. Distress calls continued to come in, but now they were answered not just by human ships, but by combined fleets representing multiple species. The galaxy was learning to work together, to protect each other, to stand against common threats. Pirates and raiders who had operated with impunity for decades found themselves hunted across multiple sectors. Slavers who had built empires on the suffering of others watched those empires crumble as their victims were freed and their operations dismantled. Tyrants who had ruled through fear discovered that fear had limits when someone was willing to stand up to them. The galaxy was changing, not overnight, not perfectly, but measurably. Civilian casualties from piracy dropped by 70% in the first year. Trade routes that had been abandoned for decades were reopened. Species that had lived in fear began to explore, to expand, to thrive. And at the center of it all were humans, the species from the Deathworld, teaching everyone else that strength was meant to serve, not dominate. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Valor 1 year after the Velkari incident. Her crew was preparing to respond to another distress call. Just another day's work. Just another group of people who needed help. She looked at her crew, human and non-human now, working together seamlessly. Coordinates locked, Captain, her navigator said. A Nix officer, trained by humans, now serving on a human ship. Weapons ready, her tactical officer reported. A Valorian who had learned human tactics and adapted them to his own species' strengths. Medical teams prepared, Dr. Rodriguez added, still human, but now leading a team that included 3 other species, all trained in emergency response procedures. "Take us in," Sarah ordered. "Someone needs help." "Let's go answer the call." The Valor jumped to FTL, racing toward another crisis, another opportunity to help, another chance to prove that the galaxy could be better, that the strong could protect the weak. That mercy was for those who deserved it, and justice was for those who didn't, that humanity's promise was real, and it would be kept. In the darkness between the stars, another distress call was being answered, and somewhere someone who had been losing hope felt that hope rekindle. Because they knew now, the whole galaxy knew. If you called for help, someone would come. The Deathworlders would come. And mercy might not be in their plans for your attackers, but it would be there in abundance for you. That was the promise. That was the reality. That was the new era of the galaxy, shaped by a species that had learned to turn their capacity for violence into a capacity for protection. The humans had arrived among the stars, and nothing would ever be the same again.